We're almost there, guys. Hey everybody, it's Amy. Welcome to Jerry's Live. We are doing a unique and fun and a little bit crazy live broadcast from across the country. I've got Kyle Richardson, the president of Royal Talens North America. And then I've also got Jeff Olson, who I believe you're on the West Coast. Is that correct?
Yes, live from my studio in Seattle, Washington.
All right. Jeff is the, I'm gonna have to take these off. Yeah, sorry. With the headphones on, I'm getting three different sounds here. Jeff is the, we've got to do something to figure this out. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Jeff, just a minute. Jeff, the art education director for Royal Talens North America.
That's correct.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We had 3 different windows open and I was hearing myself 3 times, which is terrifying enough. So, all right. So they are joining us today. We are going to be doing Rembrandt Watercolors and Pastels mixed media demo. Now, we've talked a lot about grounds and things like that as of late with some of the shows that we're doing. So I love that these episodes that you're going to be doing with us, you're going to be working on dark paper or darker toned surfaces. So it's kind of going on with the education that we've already been kind of giving everybody. So I guess, Kyle, you are up first to give us a little bit of information about Royal Talens North America. And
sure. Thank you, Amy. It's great to be here for everybody. I hope everybody's doing well and ready to have some fun.
Definitely.
Some art materials. So Royal Talens is a Dutch company that's been around since 1899, and they became a royal company in 1949. There's a lot of history on our website that you can find out, but by and large, the short story is it was a retired farmer, banker, Dutch man named Martin Talens, who decided to come out of retirement. He had been living in Dallas, Texas, actually as a deputy sheriff and doing a little bit of real estate. Came back and decided to actually start up an ink and lacquer company. And then they started developing brands like Rembrandt several years after that, and moved, they actually used to have in New Jersey an affiliate that made paint up until the 50s. So they've been in the US since 1909.
Wow.
Yeah, and I run our North American affiliate headquarters with a warehouse and a team here. And we service all of North America. We're in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is in the western part of the state. We're the part of the state that we're not Boston, but we still count as part of the state. So yes, we've been working here since independently since 2016 when we started. Previous to that, we were distributed by Canson Paper and joint venture, and now we are on our own and have a great team, and we have a lot of exciting things that we've been doing. Jeff's work as our education director has been a big part of that. So I'm very proud of his work. I'm excited for what he's going to show you guys tonight. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yay, thank you.
Awesome.
Well, Amy, thank you. Yeah, ditto on that. Thanks for having us here today. I'm very excited. I've been looking forward to this. As you said, I'm the art education director, and Kyle talked about it briefly as well. Royal Talens' broadest mission is to encourage creative experience and empower people's creativity, and the education program works to create resources for artists, for educators that engage, inform, and inspire folks to that end. And those resources include me. I'm usually the have paintbrush will travel guy, but now I'm the have paintbrush will Zoom guy. But so I travel around the country, typically speaking to colleges and universities and retail partners like yourself and art organizations. And we have a group of ambassadors who also do that for us, a wonderful group of talented artists. And then we also provide materials, both art materials, obviously, and also lesson plans and different types of demo outlines for teachers and instructors, and special presentations and lectures that we give that are real core educational materials, not just sales pitches. So, you know, we're very proud to be looked at as a resource and a partner in art education.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a core part of what we do, showing people how to use the products correctly, informing people about the properties. You know, I'm an artist as well. It's kind of how I got started with this company. I've been educated, as Jeff has as well, quite a bit on our own, but quite a bit in the Netherlands with the Dutch at the factory, listening to the craftsmen, the people working on the colorists working on the mills, the lab that, you know, has been carrying on this tradition for over 120 years of creating art materials. So we're very fortunate to have that kind of knowledge. It's fun.
That's awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. All of us have great backgrounds, both in the industry of retail art supplies, but also as working artists, and that experience combined really is powerful and gives us a lot of credibility with the folks that we're working with.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think everybody is really excited to see what you're going to be doing today, and I know I am. So,
well, let's do this then.
Yeah.
You ready to get started?
Great. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everybody.
Okay.
All right. How's that look? Everybody see that beautiful box of Rembrandt watercolor? We're all good?
I can see you.
Okay, perfect. I was hoping, no, I lost everybody.
Yep. It's just the delay. You're
all right.
good.
So first thing I'm going to go through today are the materials, so you guys know what we're working with. These are all available at Jerry's website, and if you have questions about them specifically, we'll do our best to answer them as we go through today's episode. The first are the watercolor sets themselves. I have here the monopigmented box. These are all 12 pan sets, and this is how they'll come wrapped in cellophane. You just slide the sleeve off. Nice cardboard box, and these are all metal tins, not plastic, so they're super durable and fun to work with. A nice little finger hold there if you're out plein air, don't have a work table. When you open them up, you see there's wells here and wells there. This pops open again. And this is what you'll see when you purchase the set. All of the pans are individually wrapped. Here in the mono set, we've got raw sienna, azo yellow, deep cadmium free. We have a permanent lemon yellow, permanent madder, permanent red medium, a greenish umber, a burnt sienna, French ultramarine, cerulean blue, viridian, phthalo green yellow, lamp black. So that's the 12 color set. And they all include a travel paintbrush. You can kind of see it squeezed in between there. And this is what it looks like when you put it together and pull it out. So nice little travel brush. So these are great sets. So this is the monopigmented box. Today we're also going to be working with these fantastic specialty sets. So I'll kind of show you, here's what the set looks like when you pull it out of the box. The colors all kind of have a metallic luster to them, a fun sheen on them. Just so you could see the colors a little better, I did this color swatch on the black paper, and I'll move it around a little bit too so you get a sense for it. But I'll go through these colors with you. So this first color starting up in this corner, that is our interference white. The next color over is the interference blue, interference violet, and interference green. And I have that one marked because that's a color we're going to be working with today in the demo.
Nice.
Then these are the chameleon colors. These colors show different hues as you move them back and forth. And I'll try to give you a little bit. Can you see how that angle there? Get kind of this gold look at this one color. But when you come back around, it switches to violet. See that? That's on camera, it doesn't
really
show
delicious.
Violet, but here you've got the nice violet. And now you get kind of to the yellowish part of it, the gold there at the end. So that's why they call them chameleon colors. They change. And I'll get a little more into what's working behind the scenes to make that happen. This first color is gold, red, violet. And the three different colors is how they appear based on how you go through the light sequence with them. The next color is the chameleon red, violet, blue, the chameleon violet, blue, green, and the chameleon blue, green, gold. And we're going to be working with this beautiful color right there today. And then finally, the spark colors. And these have just tiny little pieces of glass. They're a little more opaque than the chameleon colors. They don't have that color shift, but just a really beautiful mixing color, as well as being super cool on these black surfaces. These colors here are the spark green, starting over here. And then we go to the spark blue, the spark violet, and the spark pink at the end. So this is the color that's represented in the specialty set. And I'll set those aside. Finally, we've got our granulating color set. And this is that color set that we're going to be using today too. These colors here, if you're not familiar with the term granulating colors, watercolors come in different compositions, meaning they have different working properties. Watercolors can be both staining or non-staining. They can be granulating, which means they're very easy to lift, granulating colors. And we have a special granulating type color we call dust colors. This is one of those. You'll see what almost looks like little black spots. Now, correct me Kyle, if I'm wrong, that's a type of oxide or oxidation that's added to the pigment?
Yeah, it's a black oxide that's actually added, oxide black that's added to it. So it's got several different pigments. What ends up happening is some of those pigments that are granulated too are heavier, so they fall to the bottom of the solution, and so they, even in a wash, they start to show up. Right. Where that's what a lot of watercolorists look for, those especially granulating colors.
They're super rich, deep, dark colors, and they have this wonderful kind of speckled effect that you can get with them. And then there are some traditional granulating colors here as well. So starting right here with this color. These, by the way, are our color numbers. They're not item numbers for purchase. They're our reference numbers there. So the granulating colors start with a dusk yellow, raw sienna, dust pink, and a greenish umber. Then we have a French ultramarine blue. We've got an ultramarine violet, a cerulean blue, and a cobalt violet. And then down here with the greens, we've got a viridian. We've got a earth hue, terre verte, dust green, another dust color, and then finally a cobalt turquoise green. And that's this set here, which I've been open and playing around with, you can see.
Yeah, it's a really saturated, deep kind of granulating set too. It's even if it wasn't a granulating set, I would love just those hues that are in that set.
So I'm going to use one piece of white paper so you can kind of see the difference of the behavior of the colors as you switch from a light to a dark paper. And I'll be lifting them up too to get them closer so you can see things. First, before I get into the actual demo though, I wanted to explain a little bit what goes into these colors. You can categorize pigments in different ways. You can categorize them by their origin. So some pigments come from organic materials, plants and animals. Some come from inorganic materials like minerals, and others are synthetic, which means they've been altered chemically or by association with other materials that changes their working properties. You can also talk about pigments based on how they reflect light. And we talk about that in dimensions, 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional, and 3-dimensional. And these specialty pigments that I'll be working with today are what we call 3-dimensional pigments. A traditional pigment, I've got a fun little picture, look at that. Who says I can't do graphic design? So this is a traditional color. This is a 1-dimensional color, what we call an absorption color. The bulk of the pigments that we use as artists are these 1-dimensional absorption colors. So if you've had a color theory class or know anything about the physics of light, the white light or the different rays of light come down, they hit the surface, and what we perceive of color is the light ray that comes back to us or is reflected back off the surface of that item. All the other colors are absorbed. So when we see something blue, that means the blue light wave has been isolated and reflected back to us. All the other colors have been absorbed. White, a surface, all the light waves are being reflected back. A black surface, all the light waves are being absorbed. So that's the difference there. So that's a 1-dimensional absorption color. A 2-dimensional color is this example here, and that's what we call the metallic colors. Metallic colors act like a mirror does in terms of the way it reflects light. So all the light that comes down hits the surface of a mirror or these metallic pigments and bounces back to us. And what we perceive as a color is really what this pigment is made out of. So if it's a copper material or a silver material or a gold material, that's the color we perceive, but all the light is coming back to us like a mirror reflects light. So that's what we call two-dimensional color. And then our specialty colors today, or our three-dimensional colors, do something super cool. So the way these pigments are made is we start with a similar pigment to the metallic ones, a piece of mica. We've all come across mica in our lifetimes, right? It's a pretty common mineral. And we put layers of oxidized material on top of them. And the more layers there are, the color changes. So what happens is the rays of light come down and they penetrate these oxidized layers until their strength gives up, and then they reflect back. Yellow is the weakest in this case. It reflects right back off of the first surface. The red comes down a little bit farther. The blue comes down a little bit farther. And one of the reasons we refer to them as interference colors is because the light waves interfere with each other as they come back out of it. And so that's what gives them that ability to shift color, like in the chameleon colors, where you'll see one color from one angle and another color from another angle. So this is really interesting. And so the thicker this is, the number of layers, that determines the color we perceive. If it's just a really thin layer of oxidation, it tends to be yellows and oranges. The thicker it gets towards reds, violets, blues, and then green is actually the thickest of these pigments when it gets that far. So that's how it goes from the spoke. So instead of absorption giving us the color, it's light refraction. It's almost like shining light into a prism. Another example I give is a soap bubble. If you look at a soap bubble, light bounces around and we see that rainbow effect. So it's the same type of thing. So that's how that's the science, my short science course for today.
That's awesome. Thank you. They love it when there's.
You bet.
When there's
so now let's see what they do for us as artists. Okay.
I love art geekery.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my art teachery. So the other materials I have here besides the paint, of course, I've got pastels we're going to be working with today. I have some of our micro sets here. I've got the warm blues, warm reds. I'm going to be using the warm yellows that I pulled out here. And these are really cool too. They're all half sticks. They come in the box like I showed you. And what you'll get is one stick that has the pure hue, or what we call a 0.5. And then the lower the number or the higher the number, it goes into our darks or our lights. So each one of these packs is monochromatic family of one color, including both its tones, its shades, and pure colors. So they're really convenient to purchase at a really nice price point that gives you this whole selection of color. And these are the yellows I'll be working with today. This black paper I'm working with is a very unique product put out by Royal Talens. Here you can see the cover of it. This is the Gogh Black Watercolor paper. There we go, 12 sheets. This is, about an 8.5 by 11 size. And then there's a larger size also that's more like a 12 by 16. I've cut this sheet in size in half for today's demo. So that's the size that I'm using. And then of course I have some watercolor brushes. I have a stencil brush specifically. And this is what a stencil brush looks like. It's flat at the end. So it's really easy to color in stencils. I have this wonderful stencil by TCW who gives us stencils to work with. I love using stencils because you don't have to worry about how well you draw or what to draw. You can just get to work, and they're really good for showing off the working properties of materials. I've got the other colors I showed you. I've got a little sponge here I'm going to be using both to dry my brush and do a fun technique that I'm going to show you, a stenciling technique. So those are all the other things I have. Of course, I have some water containers, ta-da, lots of water. And then I've got a rag to dry things off with. Paper towels work fine as well. So that's all the materials. It's pretty straightforward setup today. If you're at home, I'm working on my studio table. If you need to cover your table, I recommend that. The good thing about pastels and watercolors is they're not permanently staining. But it doesn't mean you want to get it all over your tablecloth or your carpet either. Best way to work is get everything laid out so it's within reach, so you're not getting up. Always have plenty of water. I always use one container for cleaning and one for mixing, and then general cleanup with a towel or rags. And then have a trash can nearby too. It's always nice to have a trash can. Throw your paper towels away if you're using paper towels so they don't build up on your work surface. So that's what I'm using today. I'll go ahead and get started. The first thing I wanted to do is just show you kind of a test on what happens versus a white paper and a black paper. The first color I'm going to use today is the French ultramarine blue. I'll get some of that out of the set here.
Yeah, and Jeff, just to interject real quickly, if anybody is interested in looking at these products that you've kind of laid out, that you've shown us at the beginning, kind of while they're watching the demo, if they go to jerrysartorama.com, there is the search box, type in that keyword JL154. That will pull up the list of all these so they're easy to find, because those sets were really nice and people are going to want to look at them. So just so that they've got that keyword to be able to find them easily. Just wanted to throw that in there. Thanks.
Perfect. So this is the French ultramarine. So this is a traditional color. You can see how it goes on. Really nice, deep color, nice blendability there. It's also a granulating color that you can use and does really lifting. So this is what it looks like on black paper. Ta-da! Really, really underwhelming. Right? And there's a simple reason for that. Watercolors, one of their main working properties is that they're transparent. So on this example over here, we've got the ultramarine blue. The light hits it, goes through it, hits that white paper, and all the light bounces back through the color, and we get that wonderful luminescence that watercolor gives us. Here, the light hits the surface, passes through the watercolor, and all of it is absorbed into that black paper. So we see almost nothing as a result. Even if I tip this around, you're not going to see a lot more color. So that's kind of my control to kind of show you what happens here. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to get one of the interference colors. This is an interference green. I'm going to do the same thing. First the white paper, and then I'm going to use the black paper. So, ta-da! What do you see? Almost nothing. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. There it is. You can almost see it. But then if I come over here on the black paper, watch out. Look at that. So there you get that wonderful luminescent, pearlescent green color. It starts out a little milky as the paint is thick, but as that dries, it goes closer and closer to the hue that it meant to. So look at the difference here. I mean, almost invisible where you guys are at, and then pops out here where this was invisible before. So how do people use these colors traditionally? Typically, they mix them together. So if I wanted to, for example, use this ultramarine blue again, I'll get some color there. And I'll mix it now with a little bit of that green that I used. Okay, so now this is the two mixed together. So I don't know if you can see it real well in the camera there, but it's very similar to the other. Just a little bit of that undertone of the interference color, but not a lot of difference. What these colors do is they add luminescence. So now I'll use it over here. Now you can see how that blue and green mix together. So it's about a 50-50 mixture between the ultramarine blue, the interference green, creates this wonderful luminescent color. So now we've got two colors that are looking more similar, even though they're on a totally different background. That's the magic of interference colors. They add luminescence to your traditional colors. And that's the way most artists use them. They use them by mixing them into their traditional pigments to give their paintings, you know, that old Renaissance luster and luminescence. It isn't just about painting happy unicorns or Starbright, right, with sparkles. You use these colors to mix and create more light coming in and reflecting back out of your painting. So that's my kind of little test there. And now I'll show you a fun way to use these together with pastels. So the first I'm going to do that interference color again. I'm going to put a little pastel down here. This is the lightest of the yellow, almost a white color. I'll add a little more yellow into that, get some nice deep color on there. So there's the pastel, and I'll show you how this works. That's really fun and different. So first of all, you can You know what? I'm going to do this on white paper too. I didn't plan on this, but I think this will be fun for folks to see as well. I'll do that same light pastel. Can't really see it. I'll do some darker colors over there. There you can see it. Maybe a dark yellow. So a lot of people don't know this, but you can add water directly to pastel on a surface. So we've got this nice watercolor paper. I'll do it over here first. And you can see how it picks it up. You essentially turn it into a type of watercolor / gouache looking paint. And you can create some really wonderful blends with it. And you can do that on the black paper as well. It does a great job of lifting the pastel off too. So it's completely water soluble. Now you can go in with some pigment with watercolor, and you can add watercolor pigment directly in here. So I've got some ultramarine blue, and it's picking up that yellow, and it's doing a couple things. One, it's turning it a little green, but it's also making it more opaque, almost like you're made your own gouache. And this is something that you can do on your own. So if you're ever working with watercolors and you want them to be a little more opaque for a particular section, all you have to do is add a little pastel to it, and you can create a wonderful opaque section. I'm going to use the raw umber over here too. It's a little more similar to this yellow, and you can see how that works as well with this yellow here. So you get that nice opaque color. And I'll do the same thing now on the black surface. So here's that color by itself. You don't really get much. You guys can't even see that probably. And now I'll mix that umber with the yellow paint, or excuse me, the pastel. And now you see it just fine, and you create this kind of wonderful opaque color. So this is making water. What's that?
The great thing about that, Jeff, too, is I know a lot of people that have told me that pastels look pretty, but I'm totally afraid of the amount of colors there are. And maybe I don't necessarily want to make just a pastel painting. But when you look at them this way, you see that they're actually a mixed media tool, that they really are a way that you can augment or add to or mix in with not just watercolors, but acrylics. I mean, artists have been doing this for, centuries. They've been using pastels with oils or with watercolors, but
absolutely,
I think it's a great tool if you want, because if you have a watercolor pan set and you're painting in a certain palette, maybe you're not totally comfortable with all the mixing you could do. Your color mixing is not, where you want it to be, but pastels give you that automatic reach to that exact color that you want.
Yep. And just on an anecdotal note here, both of these materials, watercolor and pastels, are some of the oldest artist materials that we've been using. Watercolors date back to 5000 BC in Egypt, 4000 BC in Asia, in Chinese watercolor painting. Pastels go back even farther than that. They found a rudimentary pastel stick that they've dated around 10,000 BC. The first pastel sticks in Europe, along with the first watercolors in Europe, both evolved around the 15th century. Both of these things got their kickstart in Europe along with paper making. So the history of watercolor and pastel in the Western tradition is aligned with the history of paper making in those countries as well. So definitely, like Kyle said, great together. So that was a quick thing I wanted to show you. Now we'll get to the fun part of making some fun images. So I'm going to go again to that interference green, and I'm going to use this wonderful stencil here. Get some of that color. Now, just a tip for stencil, you don't want to have too much water in your brush or too much paint. I use the sponge, and I kind of dip it into the sponge to take some of that excess paint off. That way you'll get less bleed into the stencil image. And then with the stencil brush, you're really just patting. You want to move towards the center of the open shapes. You don't want to move your brush back and forth because that forces paint underneath the stencil.
And Jeff, just so you know, everyone's thanking you for the color reflection explanation. They all really, really liked that a lot.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, when you understand how something's working, it makes it so much easier to apply that material. Yes. I mean, it's not necessary, I guess. You don't have to know the science of something as an artist, but I always feel like the more you know about something, the more enriching it all is. So there we go with the interference. Look at how much that just jumps off the paper. And remember, on the white paper, this would have been invisible. So you get that nice look to it. It's a little more white as it's wet, but as it dries, it's going to be a little more green tone. This is the interference green. And again, I'm going to pull now the pastel in here. I like this exercise back and forth, not just that you can mix them, but the pastel has such a wonderful texture, or it pulls off the texture, this cold pressed paper. So here you have this very flat, matte look of the watercolor, and then you bring the pastel in and you get this beautiful kind of rugged mark making that pastels are so known for. Now I'll go ahead and I'm going to do another layer of this green, only this time it'll be over the top of some of this pastel. And so it's going to pick up some of the pastel. Here, I'm going to sliding out of center. There we go. Sorry about that. So I'm picking up some of that yellow. I'm hoping that you guys will be able to see it as much as I'm seeing it here. I did take a picture of a couple other ones I did earlier, and I'll show those at the end because in the photographs, the light's a little better. And I'm going off the page here, seeing mixing some of that color on the edge. You really can do anything you want with this project. Any stencil works. So there you can kind of see the difference on how the colors mix together, and you get that nice edge. So that heavier edge, that comes from the pastels that were underneath it. Mm-hmm. And you can go back in with a lighter pastel and you can outline objects, create some real dramatic edges that way too. You can come back in and then you can just repeat this process. The next thing I'm going to do real quick is to do one more layer of stencil on this one. And I'm going to mix that ultramarine blue again with my green.
And just so everybody knows, I can see that Kyle's helping answer some questions in the comments. So if someone is actually responding to you and it says Kyle Richardson, it's Kyle.
That's
so
me.
Just to point that out to everybody.
I did see a question in here I'd like to answer. Whether the Royal Talens watercolors, the Rembrandt watercolors, pastels, or gouaches are vegan. We've gotten this question actually more than a few times. Aside from one pigment, which is PBK9, which everybody uses, it's carbon black, right? So that pigment itself is used. It's made from the byproduct of the animal processing industry. And that's something that's very, very difficult to get around in color making to try to find a replacement for that one pigment. Aside from that, these products are basically kaolin clay for the pastels, which our pastels actually have a little bit of gum arabic in it as well, which is why you can use those with water and not just alcohol. Gum arabic is what we use as a binder in the watercolor. But if you're looking for a palette that's going to be vegan, I would recommend just learning how to mix your own black and looking at your pigment list in your products and selecting products that don't have any kind of a black pigment. PBK9 is the one that's carbon black. So I hope that answered your question. It's a good one. The watercolor paper, we get a lot of questions about as well. These specific watercolor papers are vegan. They do not use gelatin sizing. Both the Van Gogh watercolor papers we have here use a synthetic sizing.
So I'm going to show you guys a fun technique. So I mixed the blue and the interference green together here. You can see how that blue changed the color. Nice kind of turquoise it created. I added a little extra water to show you what happens. It bleeds underneath there. If this ever happens to you, this is a fun trick. You can lay your stencil back down over it, and with a damp sponge, just go back and wipe over the stencil. Both pastels and watercolors have that wonderful, unique ability of being lifted. The binder for watercolor is gum arabic. It's the sap from the acacia tree. and it's a water soluble. It doesn't create a paint film though. It actually absorbs into the paper and leaves the pigment on the surface. That's why you can reactivate watercolor. Pastels have a kaolin binder, and they're sitting on the surface as well, so they can be lifted too. So you get a little area that's muddy or you just want to clear it out again, you can lay the stencil down, wipe it with a sponge, and then create a negative kind of. So we've been doing positive images with the stencil, and this is a negative image with the stencil. So we've removed color rather than adding color. And it adds a nice different dimension to the design as well. It's almost like a monoprint.
Yeah. Nice.
And you're getting a sense, I think, of this on camera. I'm looking at it, but it's much, much richer in person and much more dramatic. So that's with the interference color. Let's go ahead and do one now. How are we doing on time? We're good? We'll do one now with one of the chameleon colors.
Yeah, we've got about 23 minutes still.
Perfect, perfect. So I'm going to put down some of the pastel again first. Don't have to cover the whole surface. I like to leave it about 50-50. That way you can get a nice comparison, contrast, what it looks like with and without. We're going to switch now to our chameleon color here. It's the color that I circled. Let me see if I have that sample for you again. There we go. We're using the chameleon color 862 there. So it's going to be this guy right here. And I'm going to pull the stencil back out. I'm going to layer it. I always say off center. You don't want to put the stencil. When I'm in the class, I tell folks, you can put the stencil anywhere except in the middle. Don't put it in the middle. All right. So we're going to use now this chameleon. Beautiful, beautiful. Chameleon blue. You can already see some of the sparkles. You see that? When it mixes with a pastel, it becomes more opaque in those areas. Mm. Such a beautiful color. Now, the difference between the interference colors and the spark colors and the chameleon colors, besides the way they look, is also how they're made. I gave that explanation of how the three-dimensional colors work. The difference between these is those interference colors are on top of a piece of mica. That's their base. The base for the chameleon colors and for the spark colors is glass. And so that's why you get a much more intense kind of sparkle from these, because they actually are little pieces of glass in there that the different levels of oxidation are built upon. Another thing that affects how they look is the size of the pigment. The pigments in interference colors are much smaller. That's why you get kind of a real uniform, more opaque look to them. The pigments in the chameleon and the spark colors are larger, and that's what gives you that sense of almost like there's a glitter effect. So let's take a look. Your sense of that. Look at, see what I mean by the glittery effect? Now we can see if we can get the color shift in here with these lights. So there's, oh, see the violets in there? Am I just seeing that? You guys seeing that a little bit?
I can see it.
Yeah,
it goes from violet to blue.
Yeah.
There's that violet again. So
With
this is what the chameleon colors do. I'm having to put it at a pretty intense angle for you guys to see it on camera, but you don't have to do that when you're sitting in front of it. All it takes is just a different little direction shift, and you can see that difference.
And it's fun to experiment with these with different transparent and opaque colors, because they with the transparency either layered on top of them or mixed in with them when they're wet, they take on different mixes, almost optical mixes with the color that they're mixed with, whether you're looking at them from one angle or the other. So they're really, really interesting.
So I'm going to mix with a green, my Viridian. Get some of that pigment in there. Now I'm going to mix it with this sparkle color. We're going to come to a different part of the stencil now. You know, watercolor, these are pan sets, and a little history on pans. Pans were invented in 1871 in England, and watercolor before that was really exclusive to artists and illustrators. But when the pan was invented, there was an explosion of popularity with watercolor painting, especially in England. You've probably heard of the Grand Tour, where the aristocracy, the British aristocracy, would take a tour of Europe when they came of age. They would often bring watercolor pan sets with them. Couldn't take a picture, right? But you could make a little painting. It was also the peak of enlightenment, and all the scientists who were exploring the globe with the British Navy were bringing watercolors with them to document their findings. So you have all these wonderful scientific illustrations with watercolors. So the invention of the pan in the late 18th century really changed the demographic of folks who used watercolor. And still to this day, it's probably one of the most accessible of the painting mediums. So there's mixed with Viridian. Viridian's a very transparent color, but you get a little bit of the sense of the change when you start to see the shift. It affects the color shift a little bit. See some of the violet there, but you get more of the green when you see that almost looks a turquoise color through there. And then more opaque when you mix it with the pastel. I'm going to do a little more pastel on here and do that same negative technique.
We've had a couple people ask about the stencil. That's not a stencil that we carry at Jerry's. We do have some stencils if you just do a search for that, but you can use any sort of stencil.
Any sort of
stencil,
absolutely,
even
absolutely.
with an X-Acto knife and either, you know, a stiffer paper or vellum, or, you know.
You can mask off with masking tape. You can use masking fluid.
Right. So I didn't want anybody to think that this was something that you had to have any special. I mean, this is something where you could still do it at your house. You don't have to do anything or be.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are lots and lots, thousands and thousands of great stencils out there to be found and used. So here I've wiped it off. I guess I'm a little off the page again. And here you can see again the wonderful change in the image. Get some really nice sharp edges when you do that too. And then you can continue again to work into things like this. You can go into wet paper with a pastel as well. A lot of people ask me that. You absolutely can draw on the wet paper. It changes the mark, which is kind of fun. But you can go in and add little details in there too. So that's with the chameleon color.
We've had a couple people ask about the brushes specifically, and just so that they're aware that stencil brushes, actually the brushes that we carry for oil pastels, for blending brushes, will work just as fine as those. I think even our pastel smoothies that are the stiffer bristles will work, but that's
foam brushes, foam head brushes work really well. If you've got an old bristle brush lying around, you just chop the top off with a pair of scissors. That works too. So you don't have to go out and buy a new brush if you don't want to. Just as long as you make it as flat as you can, so that you can do that dabbing technique, you'll be fine.
Thank you.
All right, so last but not least, we're going to use our spark color here. I've got the spark, I think it's the pink. So these paints have a wonderful finish. I'm going to start right off just by putting some of the spark paint on there. Oh, I think, excuse me, it's a spark violet. So these are a little more transparent. You can kind of see the sparkle that they have. A little bit larger pigment size. Now I'm going to go over it with the sponge again and do some cleaning out. I'm going to focus it towards the edges a little bit. You can kind of see the imprint of that. Now I'm going to go into that with the pastel. See the yellow around it there. Do a lighter one through there too. You can see how the mark changes as I come from the dry paper and then I get into the wet paper. So you can vary your texture effect by whether the paper is damp or dry.
They're asking what color specifically are you using for this right now? For
So
that
particular spark color was color 866 at Spark Violet.
okay.
Spark Violet. And then I've got the warm yellow set of the pastels that I'm using.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna post a color chart in the comments. That way people can see them. They can see the sets. It's all easier to see in person, actually.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle.
Sure.
Well, there. So we've got the pastel then mixing in with the spark colors, and you get that fun luminescence added. So you've got that opaque passage now with the pastel, and then the spark colors gives it just a little more luminescence. That's nice. So now I'm going to mix some paints. I'm going to mix this spark with another violet. Try the cobalt violet here.
Now, I see somebody's got a question about how these look after spray fixative. If somebody is wanting to take this and put fixative on it after the fact, since you're using pastels and watercolors with this,
yeah,
is there something that you recommend that you can use for fixative for that?
I think any good pastel fixative is fine to use with these. You won't need as much because the water helps set the pastel to the surface. The gum arabic acts as the binder for that. It will darken the colors a little bit, so that's something to keep in mind.
And they want to do very light coats of spray. They don't want to, because that's
always test.
Feather light.
Test, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Always test. Test on that scrap piece of paper. So this is cobalt violet mixed in. Cobalt violet is a transparent, semi-transparent, I think. And I'm mixing that in with this spark violet. Picking up some of that pastel. I'm going to put this down first, but then I'm going to go back in after I lift it up and reposition the stencil and wipe it out a little bit. So adding the cobalt violet in there is going to reduce the amount of that kind of metallic look you have to it. But the metallic or the spark should help you see the cobalt violet on the surface where before you wouldn't have. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's very easy to see.
Yeah. And now I'm going to go in with the stencil and I'm just going to offset it a little bit from where I was. Wipe out again. Now, somebody asked me once if you can go back in over the stencil with a pastel. You can't draw over it unless you're just talking about adding lines to the outside. If you do want to add a layer of pastel, it's a technique that you need to use is called dusting. So you take a little razor blade and you scrape the pastel onto it, and then you use a palette knife or a spoon and press the pastel down into the paper. Then you can do a good stencil with pastels. So there's the effect of mixing them together. So now we've got layers of pastel in there, the spark color, the cobalt violet, and you can see how just these wonderful gradations have created in the different textures because of where they were at. So that is the demonstration. Let me show you real quick while I've got the screen up here. And I'll show you one of these ones that a picture I took here. There we go. So you can see the color a little better in this image. Yeah. There we go. This is a nice one. So here's the specialty set, the stencil, and you can see more of the nuance of the color in this photograph. So the photograph it's got a higher resolution than the screen. So you've got a nice, better look at how these layers, and you could just keep on going. When I'm in a class with people and we're there for a couple hours, you can build up 6, 7, 8 layers of color on this back and forth with the pastel and the watercolor and come up with these images that look almost like tapestries. They have such wonderful depth.
Right. We've got a question from one of the viewers. They had said they looked at the product list. They don't see anything that's interference or specifically interference. What is the name of that set again?
So that set is the specialty set.
Okay. Just wanted I knew what that was, but I wanted them to know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me do that.
Comments too. Do you have can you hold it up for us, Jeff, so you can see the specialty set again?
Special set, absolutely. I'll get the box here. So special effects set. Oh, there we go. Special effects.
Yep.
It's the purple. It's the purple one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. I hope you found some new information in there that was meaningful, and try this at home. It's a lot of fun, and it's good for all ages too. Using the stencils is great for kids, so you don't have to be a professional artist to get good results. I've seen 7, 8-year-old kids come up with fantastic images using this technique and these materials.
Right. Really and with these, with the new surfaces we have and the new pigments, there's a lot more you can explore with these pigments as well, and try different techniques out for yourselves. Mixing them with different colors on white paper is something that's really interesting as well. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting to have some new pigments. You don't see that too often in the world.
Yeah, the specialty colors really dance on the black paper, but any type of watercolor with pastels on a traditional white surface, you're going to have equally exciting images, just kind of a reverse, right? Instead of that dark ground, you'll have that bright light ground, and that's really beautiful as well.
And a customer said something very interesting that I saw kind of scrolling by in the comments. They made the comment that for a pan set, that really lit up, that they used tube watercolors of interference colors before, but that they were impressed that you could get that much color out of a pan that immediately. And I think that that's a point that really bears mentioning with this, is those Rembrandt colors are highly pigmented. So in a small tin set like that, it's great because you've got 12 colors rather than, for the price of what maybe 4 or 5, tube colors are going to be, you've got an entire dozen to be able to play with like that.
Right.
Absolutely.
One thing I've noticed too about the Rembrandt pans specifically, or any of the Talens, Royal Talens pans, is that they activate really quickly. Some watercolor pans you get, it's like you're sitting there trying to get enough water in there, and it's like this is obnoxious. And other ones, they stay so wet and sticky that it's just not a good feeling either. These are kind of like Goldilocks, right in between, perfect kind of viscosity and wettability.
Yeah,
I like the fairy tale reference.
It's always got to come in there with a
fairy tale reference.
What other questions do we got out there?
Kyle, did you see any other ones that you think that he needs to
I've been answering a couple here in the comments, but I did want to say, because I didn't really get to fully explain Royal Talens as I started to in the past, but in the beginning of the video. But this demo right now, we're talking about Rembrandt, but Royal Talens actually makes the brands, Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Amsterdam Standard and Expert, Cobra, which is our solvent-free oil painting solution. We also make Ecoline, or as they say in Holland, Ecolina, which is our liquid watercolor. Comes in jars, but also in brush pens. All of these things are carried at Jerry's. You guys are a great customer and a great, family of people that I've known for a very long time. So there's just a lot of brands underneath the Royal Talens company. We make product for everybody from the beginner, the starting artist, all the way up to the professional with Rembrandt, with the same philosophy that at each level, it should be the best experience for the greatest value. So we don't make really cheap stuff that you're going to be disappointed in. When we make an entry level product, it's going to exceed expectations. So
I'm going to make a pitch for the education program here too.
Please.
In this time of Zoom, we do, or I am available to do Zoom lectures on watercolors, these materials, or any of the materials that Kyle said. If you can get together 20 or more people, send me a note and I'm happy to do a lecture. There's no charge for it, just have enough people to watch it. And I'm happy to get together and work with folks, art organizations, schools, you name it, and can customize it to your curriculum or whatever the interests of your group are.
That's awesome.
This was fun. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys being willing to still do this with us and to kind of roll with the punches on this, because especially with, you know, people that are at home, this is something that anybody, like you said, can start with. It's very, you know, friendly for all ages and all skill levels. You know, and if you saw what he did there with, you know, just a basic stencil and things like that, you know, you can, as an artist, or, you know, a well-practiced artist, a professional artist, you can be taking this and going even further. And I thought it was great that you know, mixed media is something that probably a lot of people are playing with now, being home, that they normally would not have been, because now they've got the time to actually kind of investigate it and you know, really get into it. And so I think it was great that you brought the pastels in with it too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's really important. I think it's really important to expand your vocabulary with your materials, and try to use your materials in new ways and find new ways to use things that you think might be tired and old. Pastels get this reputation of being, you know, only one demographic of people, but they are actually a wonderful tool. They're actually a lot of folks don't know this. They think of pastels as being very delicate, but pastels do not oxidize. They're actually one of the longest and most permanent color mediums out there, more than oil paints and whatnot. It's usually the surface that they're on that conservators are concerned about over time. The pastels themselves are very durable, so you can add them to anything and you don't have to worry about archivalness with them at all.
Right. Well, so everybody that's watching, if you want to see any of those products again, go to the jerrysartorama.com website. You're going to type the keyword JL154 into that search box. That's going to pull up all of those supplies and all of the kits that he used. And I believe that you used all those 3 little tin kits as well.
I only used the special color set, the specialty set, and the granulating set.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's right. For some reason, I thought there was a monocolor in there, but I didn't notice that at the beginning.
Set. Actually, the colors I used from the granulating set are also in the monocolor set. I used the French ultramarine. That's in both sets.
Okay.
The monocolor set is one of my favorite because all the pigments are monopigmented. So if you're somebody that that is good at color mixing or wants really clean mixes, you want monopigmented colors because they don't have overlapping hues that interfere with each other and become muddy. So that's like your, that's your.
And I think mono for some reason just sounds like minuscule to me. Meaning it's a single pigment, which we talk about that a lot on the show and what that means. And like you just said, the clarity of color. So it's, the mono means single. So just so that they kind of remember that.
Yeah, not mini mono.
Right. Mono in a mini set.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And I know you're going to be coming back with us next month, visiting again. So if you enjoyed this episode, definitely look for that one and go ahead and sign up for it now on our website. If you go to jerrysartorama.com, type in Jerry's Live, that will show you all the episodes ahead of time. You can go ahead and sign up to get those on your schedule so you don't miss one. So you'll get to see Jeff and Kyle with us again next month. So
Thank you so much. This was really fun, and to all the people watching out there, you know, especially in these times, support people doing things like this. Support Jerry's. Don't go to Amazon. Shop here. Shop with the family you know. So,
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Well, you guys take care, everybody. We will see you guys next week. We are doing kind of overwhelming panel options. How do you learn about panels? How do you narrow it down to find things that are going to fit your needs? It's going to be just a complete panel education that we're doing for everybody next week. So that's what's next week, but we will see you guys next month, okay?
All right. Thank you. Can't wait.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.